All right, welcome everybody. I wanted to go ahead and create a video. Hopefully that way I could maybe make the video longer, go over a bunch of other things that maybe are not included, something that I won't cover in our actual meeting in class. This is a presentation that I was asked to do for a good colleague of mine, Mr. Olson, goes by Wally. It probably tells you about Mr. Olson. Very long time retired police officer. He now obviously works at Arizona State University. Goes through teachers courses. Right now he has the introduction to criminal justice, all part of the justice studies major. It's an ethics class. He asked me to come and just give a little brief introduction of myself, who I am, to give you maybe a little background of how I got into criminal law, the different avenues or ways you could go with really any kind of justice degree, with anything that not necessarily becoming a lawyer, but anything in the justice world. So I really thought I'd introduce myself, go over some of that, and then for one of his classes, Mr. Olson has me looking over the prompt that I have written up here to the left, my left, maybe your right. That goes into an ethics questions that, as a criminal defense lawyer, we see frequently. We get asked about it a lot. There's a lot of different, maybe right answers or wrong answers or gray, borderline answers that a lot of people like to follow. So I'll briefly go over some of that later there. But I will say, once again, my name is Zachary Divelbiss. I am the owner and lawyer at Future First Criminal Law. I've been licensed now. Let's see if I looked at one of these things behind me. I just passed my 3-year anniversary as a licensed attorney. I graduated ASU 2014, law school 2016. So yeah, I'm coming up on about 4 years total of finishing law school. Born and raised Apache Junction, Arizona. So many of you who are from here kind of probably know that it's not the best place to grow up. There's a lot of things that you can do to get in trouble with. With me, I think it was actually such a small town that once I went to ASU, lived in the dorms and saw a whole new world of fun and activities that really, maybe that more or less negatively impacted me more than AJ did. But anyways, at ASU, I will give a brief, little look into my life, because it wasn't all just roses and fairy tales and golden walkways to Never Never Land or anything like that. Essentially, my freshman year, sophomore year, those 2 years, 18, 19, tough age for many people. But myself, more in particular, I wasn't necessarily the biggest partier or the person that would go out, but of course, I never turned down an opportunity such as Halloween to go out. And of course, every time you did that, you ended up with minor consumption. So I got a handful of those under my belt. Those are criminal offenses, they're arrests. And really the old nail in the coffin that did it for me was getting a DUI. DUI was, of course, my mistake, my fault. Thankfully, nobody got injured. I went in and dealt with it and took the consequences, went to jail, did a lot of extra things on top of that: interlock devices, house arrest. As I said, jail. It's really not fun. Definitely nothing I really pushed on people. But kind of what I saw at some point with that was, after that, I had a license that was my license. I wasn't driving. I was suspended at that point. This is the quick story of how I really found that I needed to go to law school for myself. And what happened was, I had a suspended license. I was in the backseat passenger of one of my friend's vehicles. That person didn't have their tags weren't up to date or something like that, or they hadn't come in the mail. So we got pulled over. We weren't doing anything wrong. We all handed out our IDs. The officer came back and said, "Mr. Divelbiss, please step out of the vehicle." I was like, "What are you talking about? What did I do?" And he's like, "You handed me with false identification." And I was just blown away. I was like, "No, sir, like that's my ID. That's me, my name, my address, everything." Like, and he wanted nothing to do with it. The officer basically said, "Well, if you want to argue about this, you can go and bring it up to the judge, and that's it." And it blew my mind. I was like, "Yes, literally, this is my ID. I don't have a fake ID. I never used one. It wasn't like we were coming out of a bar or trying to get into a liquor store. We were just driving down the street, kind of thing." Turns out, I then go talk to the prosecutor. Prosecutor's like, "Zach, I want nothing to do with you. Just tell it to the judge." So young old, 19-year-old Zach goes, "I'm going to tell it to the judge. I'm going to have a trial, represent myself." Basically, I'm able to say a handful of different things without being objected to. It's a complicated process. much less now as a full-on attorney who's been doing this for years. There's still a lot of nuance to it. And young 19-year-old me didn't know that it was going to be that complicated. Essentially, the judge came out with, well, your license was suspended, and you shouldn't have had it on you at all. I should have had the $8 ID card. Learning lesson that I probably could have learned an easier way, such as the officer, when he came up, said, "Oh, Mr. Divelbiss, I see you're 5 houses away from where you live. Do you have any other forms of ID? Or here, I'm going to watch you go home and rip this up." Like, there just was a learning moment there that I think would have happened once he obviously saw we weren't doing anything wrong, anything like that. The prosecutor could have come in and said, "No, this is not a situation where I want to, prosecute this person with a criminal offense for providing false identification," which is a big deal, especially on the criminal side and on the future consequences that it comes with for anybody who finds it on your background. And then lastly, the judge who had a trial and saw it in his court and said, "I don't really care. This is what the law says, and I'm going to believe it, and you're not going to win the case," and found me guilty and gave me more punishments, whatever it was at that point, suspended my license again, all kinds of different things, for really something I didn't do that was wrong. It was the fun fact of, I guess I should have never had my ID, even though I had my ID. I should have thrown that away and got a different ID or had my passport, anything like that. But basically, that was the moment I realized that you can mess up and you can go and pay for the consequences. But there are many people like myself where when you mess up, there are things that happen that you just don't know why that happened. And there's no way you could have known or should have known or would have known. And the police can just come in and arrest you. And, you don't know any better. You're sitting there admitting, saying whatever you're saying, and getting yourself into more trouble. And then the justice system, just in general, isn't perfect. It's really something that over the years has, I think, become better. I think it's just nowhere near as close to what it needs to be. It's, as Mr. Olson likes to say sometimes, it's Walmart justice. The court systems are there just to bulk you in and bulk you out. It's a very fast process in the criminal justice system, and it's never, or I don't want to say never, but it's a lot of the times it's not very fair. There's a lot of things that happen that you would hope happen, and they don't. Things that do happen that shouldn't happen. So there's, the long story to a quick question of kind of, how I really found my passion there. It's the multitude of personal criminal offenses that I committed, being arrested, going to jail. And then it was also seeing the other side of what my clients every day are saying, "Zach, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong, and I shouldn't, be found guilty of this, and help me out when I don't think I did something wrong." And my big thing now is I want to help people such as yourselves, people who are in college, people who have families who are going to lose them. They're going to lose their jobs, their careers, any of these future higher education that you're going to get, because those are when people get their background checks pulled. And at that point, it's too late. You can't explain really, in a way of clearing your name, you can't explain anything that really happened in your past and how you're a better person now. And, it was a mistake and you learned from it, whatever it is. And I know that just going through it myself, because then after ASU, I straightened up my act. I said, okay, that was the last thing. I'm going to straight and narrow from here on forward. Of course, I turned 21 right after that. So when I went to the bar, to law school, the bar exam, not the bar, but to law school, they asked me those questions. It's a huge interview process to get into law school, much less to graduate law school and then to get a bar license. And some of the things that they always asked me, they said, "Zach, we saw, some issues of alcohol consumption, and then great, you turned 21 and it all went away. Like, did you just become an alcoholic or not? Or just, better at committing crimes or whatever it was." I'll say for me, it was a true 180 flip. It really turned around. You stop associating with the same people, you grow up, you just do a lot better. Fortunately for me, I was just actually really good at schooling. So I kind of did school really easier than I could have done many other things, such as not opening books and then still getting A's on it. And so I think that's what really caused some of the problems in my freshman and sophomore year there. Junior year really turned it more to focus on different things into the future that I wanted to get into. Graduated ASU top of my class and went to law school, graduated law school 7th in my class. Once again, law school was very difficult. It's a challenging thing. They force fail you. You're really going up against kind of the toughest people that make it into law schools. And not everybody makes it through law school, much less than passing the bar first try. That was it's a pain and a half, but once you do it, you really hopefully never need to go back and do it again unless you're going to another state. That being said, that's kind of the brief rundown of my educational career. My biggest thing that I guess I want to say, though, is the learning lessons that I had in life. You know, the learning lessons, I call them that, even though they're the criminal offenses that if you pull my background check, you'll see there. Those learning lessons, they really added up. And, you know, and I say this to a lot of my clients to this day as well, is they're really big speed bumps, but they're not roadblocks. And what happens is a lot of people, you know, they get a DUI, our nurses, our lawyers, anybody with a professional degree, any tough engineering program, anybody CDL license, and it all just adds up in so many different career aspects. And everybody comes to me going, Zach, you just have to get this dismissed, please, please, please. I'll pay thousands of dollars. And that's when I sit back and explain and go, look, you can't buy your way out of this. And we got to figure out what happened and solve it. And, you know, really what I explain is that it is a speed bump. Yes, you will likely maybe lose a job or two to somebody else who doesn't have the same background that you have. At the same point, that might also be something that encourages them to work for you and so forth. And really it's not a roadblock that a lot of people like to say, you know, I'm never going to be able to do this again in my future. I'm never going to do that. The roadblock is something that's a little more serious than say a DUI or many of the other things that happen. Now, there are definitely roadblocks out there. Anything that's on the felony level, it's a big roadblock. You're going to be definitely losing jobs, employment, everything from there. So just a small thing there is all I wanted to mention as far as, you know, I didn't have a perfect, squeaky clean record going into law school, much less going into the practice of law. And you don't have to be. You just literally don't have to be. Of course, if you do, great. I'm not encouraging anybody who says, I want to be a criminal defense lawyer when I grow up or a prosecutor, and I really need some criminal experience now, and let me go get arrested. That's not the way I'm talking about it. Same thing, say you're going to be a family lawyer. You're not trying to go get married and then get divorced and try and dispute kids and child custody just for the sake of it. Not that I think anybody would do that. I just wanted to mention it because it's all fun and games. There are just also so many other careers that I could have gone into, other law school mates could have gone into. My undergrad was in justice studies, where I got my bachelor's in justice studies, and the program was fairly new actually when I finished it in 2014. I'm still young, 28, so I know I'm probably a couple years older than some and maybe younger than a few others that may be watching this. But anyways, I graduated the undergrad there, justice studies in 2014, and there's just, justice studies is such an amazing, undergraduate degree in the sense that it just opens your eyes to so many different other things that you can actually do in the future, in the real world. It opens your eyes to maybe be a better human or to see things a different way. And with that, especially in the criminal world that I work in, there's so many people with justice studies degrees, number one, that go to law school, all kinds that go into different kind of probationary roles to help rehabilitate people, anything along the substance mental health levels. Of course, you get a lot of people with psychology degrees who get into that. Some of the bigger things too are a lot of people become journalists, which I wasn't in any way thinking of when I went into college, but coming out of it, a lot of the people I work with who are journalists, who write a lot, they 100% back up from their justice, from their criminal justice or their justice studies undergrad educations. Everyone really in the court system should or could essentially have some kind of justice studies background or degree in it. I'm talking the bailiffs, the clerks, the sheriffs, the detention officers, any of the judicial assistants. Of course, you have all of our paralegals, our legal assistants, our operations managers, everything along those lines, especially our marketing people that help get the word out about the way to do certain things and not do certain things, especially on holidays, so on and so forth. It's just, there's just so many different careers and fields. Oh my, I was just in Veterans Court the other day, and Veterans Court had another litany of different people that were helping veteran-specific individuals. And I'm talking coordinators, health coordinators, program coordinators, like all in these director level positions where they're making big money as well, just like an attorney or the judge would be. That I was like, wow, this is, and it's great because everybody comes in, they know what they're doing, and we're just here to help people. And in Veterans Court, it's more rehabilitative. It's meant to solve some of the underlying problems and then maybe get rid of the case after the fact if needed. Those are some of just the quick things that I know always come to my head. Something a lot of people ask too is, well, why didn't you go to school to become a judge? Well, really, almost every single judge is a lawyer, was a lawyer first before you became a judge. I say that other than some of the elected positions or the appointed positions, those you don't necessarily, such as the justice of the peace. So that's kind of like, you'll see them in some of our city jurisdictions or precincts that have justices. Judges, all the same, they still get a gavel, a gown, they still can make you guilty of a DUI or assault, domestic violence, anything like that, or not guilty and dismiss the case. But it is a elected position, so you don't have to have a lot of the educational background requirements that some of our higher up judges have and so forth. That being said, I also have a ton of colleagues who went back into the education field, who went back and became teachers, whether it was an undergrad or directly at college, law school. A lot of people actually do that, which is very interesting because what you learn in law school is very law school specific, not necessarily real world specific. For instance, what I practice, there's, let's see, a book right there. That book is actually, it's huge. It's like this big. It's all criminal laws. In law school, you don't have that book. You don't study that. You study a bunch of the ideas and the premise behind laws and how to advocate and so on and so forth, so different things. Anyways, a lot of colleagues went in that field. There's a ton of nonprofits that a bunch of attorneys I know, they went and worked for them. Nonprofits on so many different realms, whether it's the criminal realm of being a victim or government agencies or all kinds of different things that really I don't even touch because I don't venture out in that far, but I just know that really once you get kind of a career path in justice studies or criminal justice, it goes into the law enforcement area so much and the government field so much that it kind of puts you actually at a higher level than many other people. Maybe say instead of getting a business degree or something that's also fairly common. I know because this happened to me too. They tried recruiting me for the FBI while I was in law school. For when I graduate law school, and the FBI actually looks for a lot of law students because they know that we're higher level thinkers and we can work on very complex issues that book basically goes through and put it all together and so forth. And I know I quickly got myself out of that field when I was like, you guys haven't seen my background check yet. They probably weren't going to be the happiest. But who knows? At that point, I was already pretty solidified on knowing I wanted to go into the criminal world, but more as a defense attorney because of what I went through. So I didn't fully go through the whole background procedure and very likely could have gotten through because of the way my past was. It wasn't maybe, I think, as bad as anybody else's. I just got caught quite a few more times than anybody else that I know about. Anyways, for the sake of time and everything here, I know this is going to be a long video and hopefully you bear with me and keep following up here. But to get to the assignment, and that's more meant for everybody just to watch, see, understand a little bit more of what I do. And I guess maybe then what I'll explain is I came out of law school, had a job with public defenders, did a bunch of internships, externships, highly recommend them, do them. It really helps you understand that where you're going is the right way. I know I went into a couple areas as interns just to make sure. I was like, I don't like family law, I don't like corporate law, and then came back to criminal just to make sure. That's your chance, your opportunity, especially while you're in college, to get as much experience as you can and more or less seeing what you don't like. Then eventually after that, opened up my own law firm. My law firm, all I do is I help keep good people out of jail. Because honestly, like I went through my personal experience, I think there are a lot of good people out in the world who don't deserve or need jail. They might need other programs, other type of resources and assistance. But a lot of times, especially here in Arizona, we have tough laws, and a lot of people just believe that the moment you mess up, whether it's either the first time or the second time, is just throw people in jail. I don't believe that. So I built a whole firm around it. Of course, I'm not the first criminal defense firm here in Arizona, but I think I have a different aspect of maybe where I come from on that and who I help. I have a team of about 5 full-time employees where it's all we do. And here's one of my Phoenix offices that we have here. Anyways, we get into the question of the morality, of the ethics, of professionalism when you become a lawyer. And lawyers, we have to take mandatory classes for it, really every year, continuing education. Even when the first time you become a lawyer, you have to take a mandatory in-person, of course now it's no longer in-person, of a professionalism class. It's all day. I'm actually on the committee for the professionalism advisory committee, where we go through and we look at all of the examples and the way we teach it and prep it for new attorneys and current attorneys, and how that really works. What we've been asked here, and this of course aligns a little more with what I do, is the question of where we fall when a defendant, your client, your signed, retained, 100% your client, really comes in and admits some things to you that really helps you know that they committed a crime and that they're probably guilty of that crime. So the factual understanding, more or less the background here, is a father named Mike has 2 small children and a wife. One of the children comes and admits to father that they were molested by a friend, a family friend, who is named George. They, of course, later down the road at some point here, find out that George was murdered. The person calls you, client calls me and goes, Zach, I'm being investigated for murder. And they call me. In this case, it would be Mike here, the father of the 2 children. And Mike comes in and he basically immediately says, after we're hired, that he killed George. And then Mike's wife comes in, who is not your client, also comes in and says, I'm going to testify that I was with my husband the night of the murder, and that way her husband gets an alibi. And Mike wants to testify as well in his own defense at his trial, if he gets there. And client also has some more comments of he was a sick dude who needed to die. Also, it's in the public interest that this person, this pedophile, creep, whoever it is gone and off the streets. At the time, the client makes no statements to the police, which is great. If you learn anything from this, that is what you do when the police come and start asking you questions. You say, I want my attorney, and I'm not answering any questions until my attorney is here and present, so forth. Anyways, so Mike's arrested, charged with murder. They're going to find fingerprints at the scene. There's also some text messages which seem to implicate that he was there. The big thing is, what are you allowed to do ethically? And let me give maybe a little background. It's just everything with the law. Excuse me. There are very few things with the law that are black and white, that are just so crystal clear that you know what you can and you can't do. Just about everything with the law is more of the gray area, where it's like, well, in this situation, you're allowed to do this. In this situation, you're not allowed to do that. Or this one's this one, this one's this one. If the person was left-handed, it was a full moon, and your shoe's untied, then you do this. There are all kinds of crazy scenarios where not every rule applies. So something I've got clicked on right here is just if you go to the State Bar of Arizona, there's an ethics page. It has rules of professional conduct. It also has all of the guidelines that we have. I know this might be the sad part is, there's a big criminal book here of all the crimes you commit. For lawyers, we essentially have these 8 main guidelines. Of course, they are massive, more or less, when you get into them. They outline a handful of different things, but you're looking at a field where we as lawyers, we help create the law. Oh my goodness, I totally even forgot to mention that so many career paths that a lot of my colleagues went into is the public realm of writing laws, of legislator, not necessarily being politicians, but being behind the scenes for politicians and writing laws that get enacted or voted on, so on and so forth. Anyways, so there's that whole aspect to it. And with kind of the guidelines for Arizona we have here, we adopted ours. There's the American Bar Association, they have theirs. Every state has their own rules. They all essentially follow the same guidelines. There are some things that Arizona is behind the times on. There are some things that Arizona is kind of ahead of the times on, per se. And, you know, and that's just kind of the part of every state's a little different. And of course, we go to the national level and it's going to be a little different there as well. But essentially, what the question that has been posed here, as far as the ethics go, is this idea of, what do you do? What do you do with this client? Can you actually represent them? Can you represent them effectively, even at that? Or what do you do? And Mr. Olson has provided you guys as well, I believe, this YouTube video. It's quick, it's 11 minutes, and the guy talks faster than I do. That's what it looks like here. It's a great video. I think in that very short amount of time, he covers just about everything you can, quickly, briefly, and dives into it that you get into when you evaluate this question. And he does it in an accurate, seemingly unbiased way, which is great to hear. Because for me, it will probably come off slightly biased of what I would do or what many of my colleagues on the defense attorney side would do versus what maybe the prosecutors who are, you know, supporting the state and the government saying that they want to convict my client. They might have a different perspective. Of course, we all learn the same ethics. We all have the same rules that govern us. We still have the bars above us. They keep our license. And if we do anything wrong, we could lose it. That's why they're there. Of course, what we get into here is a very common question, and really what I would say is there's many different ways to approach this. With my firm and with really everybody I help, I typically try and know more or less if they did it in advance. Usually because my clients come out and tell me in advance, yes, Zach, I was drinking and driving that night, or yes, Zach, I did assault my husband and that is why he's cut on his forehead. Or in this case, it would be, yes, I did kill George, and I still want you to represent me to the full extent of the law, and I want to prove my innocence. And it's a big thing that, you know, there are some attorneys, defense attorneys, who, when they meet their clients, they literally, the first thing they say is, I don't want to hear a single thing that you have to say about the case of whether you did it or you didn't do it. Don't get on the phone and call your family and say you did or didn't do it. Don't call your dog, your neighbor, or anybody else. That thought stays with you in your brain, and that's it. And it's a strategic way to do that that I'll get into. And it's not necessarily what I do or what I preach in that aspect, because in Arizona, only 2.5% of cases even go to trial. Out of every case that even gets charged and filed, 2.5% make it to trial. So there are certain cases that you do need to take to trial. Typically, the admission is not the make or break point of it, because an admission really is going to happen in just about every case where every client, one typically admits it to the police. In this situation, they didn't. But here's the deal. Some of the questions that you're going to have to answer here, and the big one, and there are two big ones. What would you do if you're a defense attorney in this case? As I've kind of alluded to, you still represent your client to the fullest extent of the law that you are allowed to do. Every client is, every defendant, everybody who is accused of a crime is entitled to the full protection of the Constitution, just like anybody else who is on the other side of it wants to use the Constitution. And you have every right that you are allowed to possess without losing it. Obviously, that is what gets you a lawyer, a public defender, or a private attorney, such as myself. And one of those things, which really goes into kind of the next thing here, is, you know, some of the questions that are being layered in here is the client wants to testify. And I will say that a lawyer, a defense attorney, is not allowed to. We are literally not allowed to. There's law that says we cannot make our client testify or make them not testify. It is one of the things that is even outside of what we can do for our clients or on behalf of our clients. If a client says they want to testify, even if I say this is the worst idea ever, or even if I say we need you to testify and they don't want to, I cannot make them do anything they don't want to. They can make me do things that I don't want them to do, such as if I don't want them to testify and they say, Zach, I'm getting on the stand and I'm testifying, they get on the stand and they testify. As it was kind of stated in the video, that's essentially what will happen. The thing is though, that I am not allowed to purge the court. I purge the tribunal. There's all kinds of legal terms for it. So essentially, I'm not allowed to lie. Perjury. I'm not allowed to lie. I can be held in contempt of court. And then everything else goes downhill for everyone. But ultimately, if I know, and this is the why of why some attorneys go, I don't want to hear anything about the case. I don't want to hear if you did it or didn't do it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the police report and go from there. And the reason why is because you can look at the police report, just like what I do as well, and you can fully advocate and fight for your client just based off a police report, because they have to prove you are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of your peers. And so the good way to think about this is kind of like, you set up a stack of dominoes that, eventually you hit the first one, the second one, and they all go fall and it looks cool. That's essentially the way a case works at trial. And what every defense attorney's, job is trying to do is we're trying to pick out certain tiles and say, look, these aren't allowed in trial because they violated his constitutional rights, whether he was not Mirandized or whether they violated some privacy rights, illegal search and seizure. And so we get some of that information or evidence suppressed. So we say, great, we got 10 dominoes here, and domino number 3 and domino number 7, you guys are out. Will it all still fall down together? It is maybe not the best analogy, but an analogy to think about it. And that's why defense attorneys sometimes don't want to even know anything about it, because they're going to say, great, I'm going to try and get as much dismissed out of your case before we even get there. And in this situation, it very well could be. Great, they found text messages and DNA, but our client didn't admit anything. And I didn't see anything about a murder weapon. And so there's just a lot of gray area question that me as a defense attorney, I'm going to go, how do you think you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client did this? Unless there's other witnesses or, more evidence that's obviously not listed in here that then explains that. But with really this limited information, you probably don't even need to know if your client did it or didn't do it. A defense attorney, competent, and just about every lawyer here is competent, we can go through and really get a case dismissed based off the fact that there's just not enough evidence here in order to go forward with this. And kind of something we learn in law school is, the way the justice system's built on the criminal side is we would rather, as a society, let 9 guilty people get out of jail than put 1 innocent person in jail. One of our Supreme Court justices said it a long time ago. That's why I'm saying it the wrong way and I'm not quoting it accurately for the right person. But that's the general premise, and it's strong. Obviously, nobody wants 9 criminals, running out free. But the bigger idea is that we have to do things to ensure that not even the innocent people end up being falsely accused and being punished. So that's the big deal of the state has the burden, the state prosecutor has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard, that somebody has committed a crime. And that's why there's obviously a whole huge justice system to prove those things. Investigators, oh my God, I got friends who are investigators for the police, or they're private detectives for the police, or for defense attorneys like myself. We hire them to go and investigate scenes, crime scenes, so on and so forth. So more career paths that always just keep popping in my head that I love. Anyways, so that's part of why we don't want to always know everything, because usually we can get it out there in advance. But the big deal is if my client comes and tells me, like he does in this scenario, Zach, I did it, I killed George. He's a scumbag, he needed to go, he was gonna molest and hurt more children. I go, thank you, George, you're absolutely right. You did it. The end. Great. Do I just, close my book and say, all right, this guy's guilty and walk away? No, what we say is, great. You are allowed to then go and have a trial because that is your constitutional right. Couple nuances here. Since I know that he did it and he admitted to it, nobody else heard except me and him. I, as the attorney, am still not allowed to then perjure the tribunal. I can't lie in court. I can't get up there and start asking questions that directly or almost so closely indirectly say that George didn't do it. And so this is typically what a lot of defense attorneys do, because it's the only thing you can do. Number one is you say, Mike, this is really not a good idea. Don't testify. Mike goes, Zach, I'm still testifying. You say, great. This is the only thing I'm allowed to do. More or less. I'm allowed to put them on the stand, and I'm allowed to say in a very vague way, Mike, why don't you go ahead and explain to the court, the judge, the jury, everybody sitting in this room today, what happened in your own words. Tell us what happened. And then I go and I sit down, practically. Now I hope it's not, made that, to light of, I would never turn my back on a client or anything like that, just sit down. But essentially what is happening here is I asked a very generic, open-ended question of, Mike, you tell me in your own words what happened. And it's called a narrative explanation, where now the witness who, only the defendant could really do this, give this long narrative, because of this side rule that just nobody really should know about as far as the jury and all that, the judge will go, oh, I know what's happening here. Prosecutor goes, I know what's happening here. Now the defendant is free on their own to say whatever they want. Thank you, Zach, for asking me that question. I was with my wife. We were, doing karaoke night, and there's no way I've never, really met George. He seems like a great guy, and I don't know how he died. But thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it, and God bless. Your client can literally sit on the stand and say that. I can't get up there and go, Mike, you didn't kill George, right? Mike, you never, had any ill will towards George, right? Because obviously I know that that's not true. And I know almost with certainty. There are some gray areas about things that I could argue about and ask questions. I could say something along the lines of, Mike, you're here about a case that involves a defendant or a victim named George. Did you know who George was? Mike could go, yes, I know who George was. George lived 10 houses away from me. Okay, how long have you known George? Oh, I've known George for 10 years. Great. And now is where, so those are the preluding questions. And they go, now, George, tell me what happened in your own words and explain it for everybody to hear. Boom. Then Mike goes and explains everything that happened, that he didn't kill George. Of course, I know it's perjury. Those leading up questions I asked had really no bearing on the whole, innocent or guilty dilemma here. It's the same exact thing with his wife, Mike's wife. I can't, knowing that she's committing perjury, I'm not allowed to bring her into the court and go, I have a witness who will testify that, Mike was not there the night of the crime, and that's all the jury needs to hear. You don't need to hear from Mike, or even if you do hear from Mike, his wife is right here to tell you that he didn't do anything. Since I know she perjured really the tribunal with her testimony, that it's going to essentially come out through me, I'm not allowed to ask that. I'm likely still allowed to get away with a narrative-ended question. A judge might shut me down. A judge has rules, it's rules of evidence, who can come in and testify, hearsay, so on and so forth. Because I am supposed to be asking direct questions. Now the prosecutor might ask more of the open-ended questions and get different answers from it, and then it really goes downhill. That's kind of how you deal with the two witnesses, and really what would happen in a real life scenario that kind of happens frequently or day in, day out. Something that the video talks about that I do want to make a slight distinction for, because it's not necessarily true. Everybody always hears the phrase, you're innocent until proven guilty. And, we even say it in court every now and again, that you have a right to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not the standard. And so in the video, that Canadian attorney, he goes, you can't get rid of somebody's innocence. He keeps saying, oh, you can't go out there and falsely testify about somebody's innocence. The big deal here is, especially in Arizona, I don't practice in any other state, so I can't speak for any other state, but you are either guilty or not guilty. There is no guilty or innocent, or you're innocent or guilty. Like, it doesn't go back or forth. You are literally guilty or not guilty. And this goes back to kind of the dilemma I was saying with the criminal justice system. Our justice system doesn't absolve those who are accused of crimes and make them innocent. All it makes them is not guilty, which is kind of the loopholes you hear about, and the things where, like I was saying before, is I'm not going to have my guy testify, and I could probably get the case dismissed due to lack of evidence, or get my client not guilty due to the lack of evidence at a trial or even before a trial. And so that's a big thing to think about, because it's part of the discussion that I have with my clients, especially when they want to testify or go to trial, is look, I'm not here to say all the really good things about you. And clients come to me going, Zach, I want my best friend, my neighbor, my Cub Scout master, I want all these people to testify about what an amazing person I am. And I go, great, like that's nice and all, but to be honest, we're not here to prove your innocence. We're not here to prove how, great of a citizen you are. We're here to prove that you are not guilty, that the state didn't meet their burden, that of all the elements that are required, they couldn't meet them. And we knocked down all these dominoes ahead of time, and then again at court, and then great, you walk away being not guilty. And that's the way it is. And that's just the true, real life reality of the justice system is people don't walk out of a courtroom innocent. You walk out of a courtroom not guilty. And to be quite honest, even if you walk out not guilty, it's still going to follow you around for the rest of your life, because everything's on the internet and mugshots, and even on police background check records, it's going to still say, first degree murder, and then next to it, it'll say dismissed. But everyone who looks at it goes, oh, he was accused of first degree murder, and slowly walk away. So it's just the turmoil of what we deal with, and why I branded the firm Future First, so people actually think about their future and get them to stop committing crimes on accident or on purpose, or absolve them of whatever issues are happening before that. Anyways, I think that covers a lot of the kind of the ethical dilemmas that are littered in here. I know, just like in that video, I could have gone and pulled the exact lines of things that say I'm allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. Ultimately, the moral of that story is everybody's entitled to a full criminal defense, that the most extreme, paid by the government, free level, and nobody, no matter how heinous or what a terrible person you are, ever is allowed to just be assumed or accused guilty until you're not guilty or innocent. And that's just the bottom line when it comes to representing clients who are guilty. The reality of it is just about everybody who comes into my door is guilty, and I know it, and doesn't change what I do. What most attorneys do, similar to myself, is we work to mitigate the charges, mitigate the consequences. So mitigate, in other words, minimize. So get rid of as many charges as possible. Sometimes officers will, grab the whole book and they'll write, a dozen charges on. Maybe they're on purpose or not. So we want to get rid of as many charges as possible. And then really, the criminal justice system these days, in my eyes, should be more rehabilitative, such as, getting people into programs, getting, people actually back into work and jobs, and not necessarily losing their license or going to jail, things that have long-term consequences that cause people to be more impoverished or to get set back instead of forward. It's the thing that's classically called for everybody who gets sent to prison. It's not rehabilitative, but it is dehabilitative. There's a new iPhone that comes out every year, and that's just my classic example of this person's 5 iPhones locked up. 5 years of being locked up. They have no idea what the iPhone 7 or whatever we were at 5 years ago was, or how now a 12 works. So ultimately, a really long answer to a short question. And that's why I wanted to make this video, that I could go over some of the nuances maybe in a different way than when I presented, virtually. I know it'll be more time restricted. Also able to go a little more into my background of kind of my journey, pre-college, then in college, and then law school, and now obviously my career. I strongly encourage everyone to at least try out the idea of thinking about law school, or thinking about really any other careers in law enforcement or the criminal justice system, because there's tons of ways to make money. Number one, I know that's what a lot of people care about. I know everybody always says too, if you're passionate about something, do that and then the money will come. 100% believe that. You don't necessarily need to have a story like mine to be like, now I want to be a criminal lawyer or anything like that, or now I want to be a painter, or whatever it is for you. And then maybe the last thing I'll leave you with is, especially in college, it's easy to maybe get by and do work as bare minimum or whatever you need to do. And something that you sometimes learn when you get a couple of years older, like myself, is it's not the decisions you really always make every day, it's the habits. And you make decisions that turn into habits, and when you make good decisions every day, that becomes a habit, and those good habits are what lead you to better outcomes. It's not the overnight success that people like to see or think that happens, especially with say a law firm like mine, who after the first year we're doing over $100,000 right out the door kind of thing. And it's not success like that that's overnight. It's really starting to develop better and good habits to habitually just get in the routine for. And you do that, and when every single day you're making good, smart, well-educated, future-looking decisions, that's when ultimately you're going to put yourself in a better spot to succeed. With that being said, I'm always happy to answer more questions, anything along those lines. As you should be able to see here, I got some of my contact information, phone numbers, email address, so on and so forth. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, and that way you can see it there. You don't have to lose anything that way. All right, have a good day.